Let's move on to our next session. It's going to be a debate. For this, I'd like to invite PV Bocassam, who is the chairman of Gion Capital, Sejal Desai, executive director of Akansha Education Fund, Naghma Mulla, CEO of Edelgift Foundation, and Minoo Gupta, vice chair and board member of India Philanthropy Alliance. Welcome, panelists.
Okay, so it's going to be fun, all right? So my name is PV. I know Amita asked, how the hell do I spell Gion Capital? It's a made-up name. It's a portmanteau. It means the J-O is for journey, and the R-N is from learn, right? The idea is that we all learn from our journeys, and this is a part of it. So thank you all for coming. Look, the definition, and we're not going to use AI here. Oops, I said that word. But the definition of intelligence, right, as some of you have heard, is really holding two conflicting thoughts in your brain. Would you agree with that? Right? Or more, right? But in this particular case, I know a few on the panel don't necessarily believe in the view that they're going to argue for, but they will for today. Right, Minoo? All right. So, this is going to be delightful. Again, this is going to be interactive. And so there might be some moving around as well. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is something that nonprofits have been obsessed about. And it's really exciting, which is this concept of overhead. Isn't that exciting? Overhead, talking about overheads? First thing in the morning, let's go. This is what I live for. Let's talk about overheads. But look, you can't, we have seen extremes, right? We've seen CEOs take private planes to go fight poverty. And we have seen the other extreme, which is sort of the jugaad view of how people can work on a shoestring budget and think they can change the world. Now, neither extremes make a lot of sense, but the reality is that they are people, individuals, and I think world-changing individuals like Mackenzie Scott, who just gives money without even asking the question, right? Which is, what are you going to do with it, right? She just writes a check. She did it for Meals on Wheels. She did it on, YWCA. Because if an organization has been running for 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, you don't really have to ask them a question of what are you going to do with my money, right? They just need scale, right, as we just heard. So this topic of overhead, do all of you know what overhead means? Okay. So overhead literally means having Wi-Fi, right? Having a printer to print your brochures, your facilities, cost for fundraising, right? So one of the things that I like to underwrite is just cost of fundraising, right? People would want to do a fundraise, but they don't want to either pay for a place, or they don't want to pay for the food, or they'll order cheap wine where people have a headache right after. So the cost of underwriting overheads is a big issue. So I've been on the board of Maryland, University of Maryland for a long time, and we just ended up finding someone who actually went to University of Maryland, but they never asked him for money. And you know what his name was? Sergey Brin. Okay? And Maryland never reached out to him, right, until after he'd become who he was. And his parents still taught, right, or just retired from University of Maryland, right, the very famous professors there. Another good example of not having enough funds to raise, we were looking to build out a brand new computer science department, and the CS department there is one of the largest undergrad CS for women. We have the largest amount of women in the CS at University of Maryland. And for some reason, the last name happened to be different of this one individual. So we had a little fundraising right here in San Francisco, and we realized that the person who actually showed up ended up just having sold his business to Meta, then Facebook, who built the VR Oculus headset, right? And he ended up giving the first $250 million to build our building, right? But we'd never reached out because we did not want to spend the money to fly out to San Francisco, have a little small event like this, have him bring his wife and their compadres who are former alums just to ask for money, right? So just one small piece of help helped raise our first grant of 250 million. So what we're going to do here today, and I'd really like for you to do this, okay? The win would be, now those of you who today evaluate charities based on low overheads, could you raise your hands, please? Like, that's one single metric. Just a few of you? Come on, there's got to be more. All right, you got to make it a little bit more fun. You can't have like 5 people. All right, because here's what I'm going to do since you guys are not participating, okay? This part of the room. Okay, so what side are you on?
4.
You're 4.
Four.
You're
Overheads are needed.
4 overheads, right? You like fancy cheese platters. He likes $1,000 bourbons, right? You like no, I'm just joking. So you're having a debate about who's going to be on the debate?
Wait, we have 4 overhead.
No,
Okay, so Ravi.
let's set the stage a little bit. because
Yes.
It's important.
Exactly.
Number one, how do you define overhead? I think the number one thing for overhead is general and administrative costs
Right.
for the nonprofits. And we all know where we come from. That is the first question that majority of us ask.
Yeah.
So we can't escape it.
That's right.
So Minoo and I are going to debate for measuring overhead as a metric. And Naghma and Sejal will argue on the opposite side. And that's, I think, how we will.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right? So the first is understanding what overheads are, right? And these people think that we got to measure overheads, right? If you're spending a little too much, then hey, like he's going to ask. I think his wife works for some fancy bourbon company. Like, why are you spending $1,000 on bourbon, right? Whereas Naghma is going to say, well, we drink fine wine, right? I'm just joking. Anyway, so what we're going to do, okay? So the first question, right, for the debate, because the goal is, right, there is absolutely no right answer, okay? But the idea is, should we measure the idea of spending money on overheads, right? Is the concept of measuring overheads a single biggest indicator of how donors should view giving to nonprofits? So I'll start with you, Ravi, and then Minoo. I'll have you guys spend 2.5 minutes, and then have you guys give a response in your view. Go ahead, Ravi.
Thanks, PV. By the way, he's setting us up here. So, so to be clear, it is definitely an important factor, but it never, ever should be the only factor. And the fact of the matter, actually, if for majority of the nonprofits, they're very responsible with overhead costs. Invariably, they're very careful in every spend. Yes, there will be few examples which get blown out of proportion, in my view. But for us, when we have built organizations, and by the way, I don't look it, but I've been an entrepreneur for-profit and non-profit for 50 years. For the last year or so, my entire 90% of my focus is how will these organizations, and one specific one, will last another 50 years. So that's really the focus. So if you start blowing money on overhead, it'll be gone tomorrow. So we have to be always mindful of how we can create lasting impact of any cause that we essentially are passionate about. So that would be my answer in terms of the overhead costs are a critical component, but it has to have some metrics. Each cause will be quite different. So it is incumbent upon the founders and the senior team to be transparent and explain the context of the cause and show them that every dollar that they are donating, only a fraction of it is going for pure general and administrative, and majority is going for the benefit of the program and the project.
Thanks, Ravi. So, Ravi, since you have the mic, could you also tell more specifically what your nonprofit does and what your overhead costs are and how you look at it from your nonprofit?
Sure. A couple of quick examples. On the nonprofit side, I found a social entrepreneur about roughly 30 years ago. Grew up in upstate New York, son of a surgeon, went to the best schools, Tufts, Yale, University of Chicago, PhD. And he grew up in New York since he was a child. He went to India to do only one thing, basically alleviate the injustice by microfinance loans. He was just trying to raise $50,000 at that time. His name is Vikram Akula. And I said, Vikram, if you raise 50,000, I'll match it. So he raised 60,000, but I only matched it up to 50,000. He went and lived in India for the following 15 to 20 years, grew that organization from zero to helping 10 million families. And his was hell, but he stuck it out. And I used to go at least 3 times a year, spend a lot of time with him. And that is, I feel very strongly about. The following example I'll give you, which is, again, no engagement on my part. I liked the entrepreneur. He was a banker from London. He started Agastya Foundation for STEM education. He pitched it. Blindly, I wrote a $100,000 check about 25 years ago and promptly forgot about it. 5 years later, he sends me a message, everything going well, I'm living in Bangalore now. And finally, we connected again 20 years later, this past year, visited his campus. He has helped 25 million medium to middle school kids. Impressive. How is that possible? So you really ultimately bet on the people with the passion and the cause. Last one, which is my own personal, where I'm engaged daily, is providing clean water to communities, rural communities across India. We are in about 6 states now. We deliver clean, safe water to over 1 million people every day. And majority of the programs which get announced in India, they fail after 2, 3, 4 years. Ours is now 12 plus years. And my plan right now is it'll be permanently solved in the communities we serve. We don't need to invest anymore. And we deliver it at about $36 per family, one-time investment. They get a lifetime worth of clean water.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ravi. Minoo, now your stage is yours.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ravi, for setting that up. So my name is Minoo Gupta, and I've been part of Foundation for Excellence. That's an educational nonprofit that was started in Bay Area. And I've been associated with them for the last 15 years, and also a founder circle member of IPA and on their board for last 10 or 12 years. So, but personally, I'm a technologist who worked in various Bay Area companies for the last 40 years. 2 years ago, I retired. I said, I've done enough in the technology, learning technology. And I'm going to give back in different ways to my own community. So I became a forest school teacher, so I can live my day or mornings in the Redwood Forest. And as a passion of mine is arts. So I always wanted to be an art teacher. So I started this little school called Jigyasa, an exploration of clay. And I teach anybody who's interested in exploring with clay. You could be a 6-year-old or a 90-year-old. So I have a lot of people who take classes. And I also do pottery myself. So that's a little bit about me. But I'm here today to talk about overheads, right?
Measuring overheads.
Measuring overheads. So I think often when, I've dealt with, worked with a lot of donors, And as part of Foundation for Excellence, I was their volunteer president for last 10 years. I'm just stepping down from that last year. And the organization has been built on the ethos that passion can transform any organization, right? I mean, that's really the ethos of the organization. But to run an organization, just saying that overheads are going to be not needed or the organization is not running efficiently if the overheads are high, it's kind of, you can't run an organization without overhead. Efficiency is important, but overhead is the necessary backbone of running any organization. You need systems, you need Wi-Fi, like you just said, you need resources, and you need people to manage all of that. So you can't just say overhead is unnecessary, right? To me, it's a backbone. And all of my examples that I will give are, directly seen and heard from Foundation for Excellence. And Foundation for Excellence supports underprivileged students in India to become doctors and engineers and lawyers. And we have been supporting this cause for the last 30 years and supported about 50,000 students all over the country. And every single one of their lives is transformed after they finish graduation because they come from families who are struggling to have the next meal. So they are earning 1.5 lakhs or less per year. That's $3,000 per year. So they are hungry for success, and education opens door for them. So I would just say that overhead isn't a waste. It's actually the backbone that enables programs to run efficiently, reliably, and with integrity.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now for Naghma and Sejal, okay, so who wants to go first? How would you counter that?
Perfect. Well, so I'm Sejal Desai. I'm the executive director of Akanksha Education Fund. We make an investment in students from low-income communities for a 20-year period with the children, their families, predominantly with a desire to see outcomes of economic mobility, having our students live a life of agency and purpose at the end of it. And so it's a strong investment. We do this through our transformative, innovative schools, as well as the desire to basically provide effective school-to-work transition. So I know there's a conversation on scale and depth, and we like to talk about the fact that we scale deep when we work with our students and communities. We are supposed to be arguing, the fact that the importance of overheads, which of course, our wealthy, opponents were talking about. From our perspective, I think one thing I wanted to say was that that overheads, right, is the measure of accounting, not necessarily a measure of impact, right? And so, while I agree that as one of the measures, it's important. What it does talk about is how money is spent, not what change is actually created, right? It captures inputs, not outcomes. And so if a nonprofit was running with a 5% overhead and achieved very little, and you compared it with another organization that operated at a 30% overhead but delivered transformative results, it just proves that efficiency is not necessarily effectiveness. The second is that overhead measurement sometimes penalizes the very things that make organizations effective and trustworthy, right? Things like strong leadership, data systems, compliance, and staff development. These investments show that a nonprofit is serious about accountability and about learning, but they drive up overhead, right? But ironically, the more an organization actually invests in these, it is a well-run, it becomes more well-run, right? And the third thing I wanted to mention, because we ourselves went through this experience, was that in places like India, right, where regulatory compliance through FCRA and CSR are essential, administrative spending is part of safeguarding donor funds and ensuring transparency. So labeling overheads as waste, in a way misunderstands what it actually takes to operate an organization responsibly. So what are these real, leading indicators? What should they be, right? In my opinion, they should be outcomes and impact, things like literacy gains or job placements or health access or beneficiary voice, transparency and adaptability, right? Does the organization team evolve sharing in the successes and the failures, right? So what is really creating meaningful change is really important. And so in our opinion, I think overhead doesn't measure any of these things. At best, it's noise. At worst, it encourages underreporting and chronic underinvestment, starving organizations of the capacity they need to deliver impact on scale.
Right. Thanks, Sejal. Naghma, to you.
All right. In 2009, Bridgespan came out with a report that spoke about something called the starvation cycle. And what was the starvation cycle? Funders take a lot of time to find the ideal NGO whom they like, then talk to them about how they're wasting a lot of money on operative costs. Because of which the organization starts feeling that they are embarrassed by their costs and starts hiding their costs, and also underspending on the critical items that make them work. Now, after that, when the time comes to evaluate performance, the performance clearly not up to the mark because you've not spent enough to make performance happen. Now, this is a vicious cycle that not only one organization falls in, it's a whole mindset that comes when funders come to compare performances across sectors basis the cost and the operating capability of an organization. This is the starvation cycle that Bridgespan spoke of in 2009. We are in 2025, and we are still exactly where we are, and maybe in some ways a little worse off because we've got even more sophisticated metrics to compare apples, oranges, grapes, bananas, and maybe burgers. There is, how do we try to solve humanitarian issues by comparing what it is to rent an office in Bombay versus in Assam versus in San Francisco? How do we evaluate how performance happens when someone is using a Salesforce versus a Microsoft Excel? There has to be reasonability in what we are saying operating costs are, evaluated for efficiency of the organization per se, but how can we have one broad 5%, 10%, 12% across a sector that deals with different crises in different places by different people with different assets? Just does not make business sense for everyone in this room who comes from business. It is not viable. So what do we do? How do we then look at it? I would lean on a lot of what Sejal says, but there's something that we did that I'd like to talk about. We're Edelgive, I'm Naghma, I'm coming from Mumbai. We fund in India, we fund small organizations across the country, different contexts. We created something called the Grow Fund, Grassroots Resilience, Ownership and Wellness, said we will only fund 100 organizations for non-programmatic costs. That means operating costs. And then we just started mapping where they spent. The first 2 quarters, we got line items like repairing toilets, going for retreats after 20 years of working, retreats that cost less than 100,000 rupees for 20, 30 people. That kind of humble retreat, paintings, chairs, pens, ball pens, stuff like that. Then it progressed in the next 4 quarters to better teams, better assets, better digital assets and human assets. And the last 2 quarters were about CEOs, CXOs, researches, strategies, all of that. And so when you say, and these were 100 organizations, this was not 1 or 2. 100 organizations who basically proved that when you don't judge and when you don't punish but support, organizations spend better than we can ever imagine. It's in their interest to spend better, and they tend to follow Maslow's theory. Now, if they're following Maslow's theory and we as funders are only funding the tip of that triangle, the triangle will crumble. So as funders, I would say, yes, please measure the overhead. Please keep a tab on it. But comparing it, using it as any kind of indicator to compare you and me and her and anyone else is unreasonable, unjustifiable, and does worse off to the ecosystem. We leave the ecosystem worse than how we found it.
That's a great point. Can you give 20 seconds on Edelgive and Edelweiss as well, please?
We were founded in 2008 by Rashesh and Vidya, who basically thought they made more money than they had ever imagined and said, we'll give 1% away every year. It was not CSR, it was not anything else. But at that point, they put that one line that guides even me till now is bridging the gap of resource between non-profits and for-profits. And Edelgive is basically honoring that one line that both of them put out like maybe 18 years ago. We work to give grants to small and mid-sized organizations across the country. We are looking to move across the globe, but largely giving in relation to context of what organizations are trying to do instead of coming with this. We're a financial management, we have a financial asset management parent. I'm a chartered accountant. I know something about numbers, and I can tell you the way we are measuring overheads and comparing them is absolutely ridiculous.
Great point. I know Ravi is ready to go for a second point. Let's go, Ravi. Then
Couple
we'll
of
do a quick poll.
couple of quick points. They have done some remarkable work. Edelweiss through Chris Capital, I enjoyed the good run up many years ago. But Naghma and her team actually are precisely the point this discussion is important. There are organizations and individuals who absolutely recognize the need to invest in overhead for worthy causes. And more I'm seeing that we are able to do that without, see, you have to convince the donors. Just like you have to convince the investors, you have to convince the donors. So in the organizations which I have not mentioned, going back decades, as trustees, we wrote checks specifically for overhead so that when that investment goes towards raising capital. So there are more and more donors and institutions who underwrite, just like you talked about.
Great.
So
let's
I think, yeah. Well, I want to add one point. They're all valid, good arguments. No debate there on that. But I also saw one example very recently. We were called upon to take over a peer organization, about the same size as us, pretty much, in clean water in India, and we did due diligence on them to take over. Their costs were 300% of ours. So it's crazy. There are organizations who totally miss the mark, big time.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to guard against.
So can we run the first poll? Is it possible to do the first poll so we get some audience participation here, if you don't mind? Was this the first poll? Great. So I think like in this balance, right, between stewardship and starvation, how many of you changed your mind around investing? Like, so how many of you use Charity Navigator to look at the costs? A few of you. Okay, but if you haven't, I would strongly recommend that you go take a look because it actually calculates, right, how much it does for every dollar that you give, right? Is it 9 cents or 35 cents that goes towards the actual programs, right? So when you look at some of those costs, it becomes very critical. And as the argument made, it was maybe that's not just the only lens you have to take a look at because it really depends on the number of different factors. Okay, second question. As you think about how much does trust, right, matter in measuring? So do you believe in the McKinsey-Scott type of large donors, or do you believe in having active donors that want to know where every paisa is going? Where do you all each fall on this?
Can I respond to that? Firstly, I want to bust a myth about McKinsey Scott's giving. She's not, she's not waking up in the morning and distributing wealth. And she's not giving it simply because she likes what she's hearing, or she likes the name, or she likes where you're coming from. There is a team.
Of course.
And there is a team that has done due diligence, that has the intense due diligence of compliance, of capability, of history, of everything. And then she comes and says, okay, take this and do whatever you want. So it comes with high accountability. And because it also comes in high public eye, it is in the interest of the organization to perform better. So you have to also see the whole topic today is not that overheads should not be looked at. The thing is, what is reasonable overhead? How do you reasonably use overhead as a comparative? And are we supposed to use it as a comparative or use it as standard efficiency matrix? That is, I think, the topic. Mackenzie Scott, I think, is brilliant because she prepares before giving and then allows them to do what they like. How we have heard about it is like Mackenzie Scott is not Santa Claus. She,
Exactly.
Good point. So would you like to have? Please go ahead. Let's go around the panel.
Going to your transparency and trust question, right? I think one is they're not necessarily the same thing, right? Transparency is what you show, trust is what you feel, right? And while nonprofits can publish audited financials, list their overhead ratios, and disclose program details, that's transparency, right? You're actually providing the information that your potential donors or donors need to have. But trust is something that you earn. When donors believe that an organization is consistently using the resources wisely to create impact, that's trust, right? So transparency, in a way, builds conditions for trust, but it doesn't guarantee it. And so I just wanted to sort of make that distinction. In a way, one other way to think about this is that you can be completely transparent, right, about running maybe ineffective programs, and your donors won't necessarily trust you. They'll simply know sooner that you're not really achieving the impact that they thought you were achieving. So transparency without effectiveness is just information. It's not trust.
Got it. So I want to give some of the others. So Minoo, what's your take on this? How would you counter?
I think it's hard to counter.
Okay.
Right? I think trust without, transparency without trust is hollow, right? And trust without transparency is fragile, right? You're going to lose trust very, very fast
Well said.
if you're not being transparent. And I think when a donor feels that their money is being utilized to have a meaningful impact, that they feel that they've been led into transparency. They know that that's happening, but to be able to see it in action, that's what builds trust, right? So at FFE, when a alumni stands on the stage and says, now I have become the donor, and I'm going to support 2 of students who are just like me, that builds trust. That's action, right? You can't go back and say, oh, I didn't see that. So I think at that point, the transparency that the student is there is alive in front of everybody. And it's confidence that the alum felt that he was supported in his journey. And now he can do the same through the organization because organization is doing the right things at every step.
Ravi,
So that would be my...
Sejal and Minoo's point is very well taken. See, transparency leads to trust. That's the hope, but more times it's true. I want to go back to what Naghma said about, comparing apples to oranges to pears or bananas. The problem is there are no standard metrics out there based on vertical, education, public health, skill training. There's no metric out there. There's no standard. So people are making up all random percentages, as Naghma said. Somebody has 5%, 8%, 10%. That's not reality. That's totally unrealistic to expect as a donor. An average donor doesn't have the knowledge base and probably the experience to judge, is 5% better than, they'll just say, oh, yours is 30%, the other guy's 10%, so I got to write that check, which will be the wrong decision.
exactly why comparison is unhealthy.
No.
Yes.
well,
No. So, see, we have to combine
We need to spice this up a little bit, really.
efficiency and effectiveness.
Yeah.
It's up to the organization to present that to the donors, potential donors. That's how it leads to donors especially donors are very loyal. If they identify with the cause and they feel that their money is being well spent. So that's our job.
So, PV, I don't know if we've moved anybody else in the audience, but I think we've moved our opponents onto our side. I was just going to say that. But a second point, I actually, just one other thing that I wanted to
I knew
mention.
there was going to be a drift from this gentleman here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you bet. But I did have a question, right? So for those of you that raised your hand about, measuring nonprofits with, overhead being one of the yardsticks, right? Is that most of you are in business? Is that how you measure for profits, right? If you're looking at a startup, if you're looking at a business, is the first thing you ask them what your overhead or admin percentage is, right? If not, why are nonprofits being asked to live up to this kind of standard, right? And I think that's a very important question each one of you needs to be thinking about. None of us want to have a wasteful organization, right? None of us are here to say, okay, great, nobody's measuring it, let's go party. We're all here because we deeply believe in the impact
Yeah.
we want to create. But we need to do that,
Okay, so we're gonna get, I think there's one more poll left, but, and I want to open it up for the audience as well. So we only have about 10 minutes to go and there's plenty to talk about. Look, I mean, there's some, like the two great organizations I've been involved with right from the get-go, right? One's been Pratham, right? Well, the first school literally started with one umbrella, right? And they didn't have any chalkboards. They just went to construction sites and said, okay, you want to learn how to counting? Let's pick up all the stones, right? You want to learn how to draw? Take that stick and let's draw it on the sand, right? And now they are a fairly large organization today, right? And the second one, I know Desh is going to talk about it. I mean, he runs an amazing organization called Akshay Patra. For $20, you can feed a whole year, right? But the scale of operations is pretty remarkable, right? So I took a bunch of friends over to Bangalore, and I saw the center in just on the very close to the ISKCON temple there. I mean, it's 100,000 meals, right, a day from one school, right? And yes, do they use hundreds of auto rickshaws and do they have a lot of people coming in? But the number of people that want to feed off of that system in a negative way is actually quite a bit. So I remember going to Rajasthan once, and they actually have a machine where they actually separate stones and nails, right, and other types of grime that's thrown into the rice that they get. And there's an entire system that someone had to go build, right, to separate out sand, because one bad mistake, right, in a school where if they're accused, right, of finding, a pebble or a nail in their food, the government's going to shut you down, right? So the cost, right, of overheads are not just about everything we talked about. It's also one of reputation and not forgetting that there is a mission, right? In this case, whether it's feeding a child or educating a child. So I want to open it up. I think we have one more poll. Why don't we run that poll, and then I want to open it up for the audience as well. So then Madan, you have a question there for the panel?
I think there's a larger question that I want to, okay, I think I'm audible. I think this is like a 200 man-hour overhead on this conference itself, this conversation, right? For two reasons. One, I think the way to look at it is where the lens of collaboration. At the Headed Life Foundation, the last 4 years, we managed to bring down the cost per job from 21,000 to 9,000 just by collaborating, right? And we don't do that enough in the nonprofit space. Two, what India needs also now is systemic change, where again, collaboration and creating an ecosystem plays a big role. And when we measure pennies on overhead, I think we're missing the wood for the trees, right? So I think the key perspective that I would want probably as donors to look at is how are the organizations collaborating? What is the systemic change or the ecosystem that we're building? And then we will see overheads automatically coming down because each of us are spending X. If we can all collaborate, it'll be a point something of that, right?
But it may even go up before it goes down. And I think that,
Possibly.
Just to build those collaboratives, it takes investment. And so I think having that recognition is important, but great point.
Great. Any other question? Amar, did you have a question? Okay, anyone else who have a question? Yes, sir. Okay, some of the Slido? All right.
I think there's a question.
Yeah,
Go
he's
ahead.
got the mic.
So just a related question. So we spoke a lot about overhead today, but should we actually be talking about capital efficiency, where we're not just looking at cost side of things, but how are nonprofits leveraging, structuring endowments to actually use their capital reserves to build for the future? Ravi ji said about potentially building organizations that can last another 50 years. And 50 years is a lot of time to compound, have a compounding effect of capital. Are we not talking about that enough? Are we talking a lot about the cost side of things, but not about building capital efficiency through investments in your foundations?
So why don't 30 seconds for each of you. Let's start with you, Minoo, please.
So I think, you bring up a good point, is how important is efficiency and how are you investing to use that, dollars that you have or money that you have efficiently to sustain. So I think efficiency enables scale. I mean, there's just no doubt about it, right? Today, if you're not investing in digital infrastructure and you're just throwing humans at it, you're probably are going to spend more money. I mean, that's just how it is. And in this case, efficiency is about building scalable systems that can help you drive more impact. And that's what, at the end of the day, everything needs to lead to impact. And at FAP, we actually saw this. So we were managing our scholars and getting the scholars and vetting the scholars through Excel spreadsheets about 10 years ago. And then we put in a automated system using Salesforce, somewhere here. They give a lot of support to organizations to build these systems. And now today, like within 1 month, we can process 30,000 applications that we get to get the scholars intake. And we can only intake 4,000 or 5,000 because we are capital limited. So if any of you want to join hands, it'll be great. But the point is, without digitizing, we will not get there. So using that capital efficiently allows us to scale today. And that's
Yeah, so I think Ravi, I think the question also was, right, so you have these endowments where you got to think, like you said, 50 years. What's your response to that? And we'll 30 seconds for each of you, please.
These are obviously thoughtful, important points to think about and figure out a solution. In my view, each cause has its own life cycle metric, but we have to also understand the size of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about few anecdotal stories we feel good about that we solve. We have to think about, is this $100 problem or $100 million problem, which we are going to solve? Based on that, and then how much time do you have? What resources you want to? So you want to lay the pipe using digital technologies now. Back then, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, some of them didn't exist. So we need to leverage every possible resource, both in terms of people, equipment, and technology, to address the problem in the best way so that it's effective in delivering the benefit to the families. But by the way, I'm completely focused on rural families. So always think of them in front of me, whatever I do. What are they going through? Why are they doing what they're doing without thinking? So I feel that by impacting like that, I think we'll always do the right thing as an organization.
Thanks, Ravi. Naghma.
I think you're asking about long-term sustainability using endowment capital that lasts longer than endowment, so that there's no dependency on funders, right? That is, see, for something like this, one is how many organizations who are actually operating in the field get endowments, right? For Edelgive to be able to do what it does, we needed an Edelweiss to be our parent company, to trust us, to give us that money and say, okay, on the bad years, we're going to be still standing behind you. We didn't have the threat on a quarter to quarter basis of, how many lives we are impacting and our parent company saying, aise nahi ho sakta hai. So one is the nature of the capital that is bestowed on the organization, the patience that it takes to turn around over a period of time, the liberty that the organization leader is given to use the capital to their best interest, best advantage, is something that most of the organizations don't have this benefit, and therefore that topic doesn't even come, whereas that should be our number one criteria. That should be absolutely. Add to that the regulatory environment. We are not allowed to give corpus donations anymore. Any funds that go into any organization in India, 90% of it has to be given away before 31st March. CSR funds that are not utilized down to the last dollar have to be returned to the company. after 31st March. We've got these kind of rules. How can we even, I mean, there's no point in talking about endowment and, long-term capital efficiency when there is no capital to be efficient with. You have to give away money. It's almost like this word on you'll get penalized, your licenses will go, you'll be fined. The parent company's COO has to sign off that this grant has been used well. Why will he sign off? He's never even heard of this organization. So there's so many realities that impact what overheads look like. And because that capital is not available, my cost of fundraising increases. My cost of operation increases. So overheads increase. And now a funder is going to come and tell me that I'm inefficient. So this is, I'm saying that it's not the funder's fault, but it's definitely not the organization's fault. Patient capital is extremely important. Okay, comparing one to another is not important. Compare that organization to its last year. Use the same. Look at the costs and see what they're doing last year versus this year. That scale versus this scale. Why compare it to somebody else who's sitting in some other place doing some other thing? It doesn't make sense.
Sejal, quick, please. Thank you. Great point. Great question.
No, I'm going to be super quick. I'm going to +1 everything Naghma said. But all I wanted to do actually was really, this is an action for everybody in this room. There's business leaders, nonprofit leaders, people that have influence, right? Change the conversation, change the narrative. When you're talking to nonprofits, when you're talking to other donors, one conversation at a time, this can change. We should not be measuring 21st century organizations with 19th century rules on all of this, right? And so how can you all help us move forward?
19th century rules were better.
Some of them were, yes,
All right.
absolutely.
The way the Tatars gave money 100 years ago was better
That
than
is
what it's
true.
giving now.
That is true.
It's true. So how much time do we have left? We have 2 minutes to go, okay? So I'd like for each of you, we'll start with you again, 30 seconds. I want to give you, you're like one-line zinger so that you can make your point to the audience. One-line zinger. No, just one line. And then I'm going to get to one word pretty soon. Because no overheads. No overheads in sentences.
Please, go ahead.
1 second. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and finish up your point, or do you want the question first? You want to comment? Okay, yeah, they'll be around. We can have a continue the dialogue. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think everything we've talked about is important, but at the end of the day, your giving needs to come from heart, right? I think you have to believe that what you're giving makes a difference. And that will go a long ways, right? I mean, give with passion, give with where need is and where you feel the impact is most.
Great. Ravi, 30 seconds.
The best way to raise money is that you have to convince with great conviction to write a check. And you'll figure out how best to do that.
I think use your brains, not your heart.
I love it. Love it. Okay.
This sector is heavily overwhelmed by the burden of everybody's good intentions and heart. Use your brains, it'll be fine.
Love it. Sejal.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And I would say the question really is not how lean a nonprofit is, right? It's what the return is in human potential, in dignity and opportunity for every dollar or every rupee you invest, right? And then, and again, a lot of us do lead with stories of the heart, but I do agree that make decisions using your brain.
Look, at the end of the day, this has been, I hope you guys, hope you all enjoyed the panel. Incentives drive behaviors, right? That's what I take out of it. And there's a very famous story of I won't name it's a famous Russian long jumper. And every time he won the Olympic medal or a world Olympic record, he got a cash prize, right? And in those days with the Soviet, money meant a lot. So he figured out, you got it, Emar got the name. And he figured out that, hey, so when he would practice, right, and he knew he could jump, maybe 3 feet higher, but he did it at 1 foot increments, right? So he got 3 bonuses. So it's not that he couldn't go above that, but he figured out that it's better to break the world record 16 times. And the best part, he's broke his own record 16 times. Right? So incentives drive behaviors. So the whole conversation is really about not worrying about overheads or things that are myopic, right? Is the question is, what incentives do you give people so they not only give, and I do agree with you a little bit, but I do think that you have to give. You have to give some more. You have to give a little bit more. You have to give a little bit more than what you gave, but you gotta give it until it hurts. Okay, so I urge all of you, if you enjoyed this panel, please contribute to their charities. All right, and if,
PV, there was a comment here.
yeah,
We want to
and-
make sure we
and-
get.
And to, do you want to finish with the comment? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking of building on what Sejal was mentioning about the comparison with the corporate sector. When somebody goes to a VC for fundraising, he doesn't start with telling about the administrative cost or overheads. It tells about the idea and the potential. And in this case, when we talk about the non-profits, it will be about the impact on the society which it is going to have, not about the overhead. But at the same time, we again comparison with the corporate sector. When we compare for equity investment to companies, we look at their growth, their ultimately earning per share, which it is going to have in next 10 years. And it doesn't matter whether overhead is a little higher or lower. But if we are comparing in the same sector with same expectations, then we look at the overhead. So similarly, in non-profit sector, if we have two similar kind of organizations, and they are working in same geographical areas, addressing same kind of challenges, then probably we can look at the overhead, and that too not in the last percentage point, but at a broader scale. And just to give them a feedback, there's a scope for improvement, but that is not the deciding factor for investment. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, because it's giving day, right, and we have the option to give. So, if you all would want to do that, right? I mean, you all accepting donations for your
Yes.
nonprofit?
Absolutely.
Always.
I know he's writing the first check.
That's right. So,
MR is writing.
oh wow, did we change opinion? 55%. We did great. This is great. Congratulations. Okay. So for everyone in this room here, if you'd like to contribute, okay, for everyone that contributes, I will match it.
Whoa! Woo!
I'll match it dollar for dollar, okay? If it
Wow.
goes to these four.
Wow, even better.
Come on. So please give. Please give.
awesome.
All right? But,
So should
but
we
you
put-
got to give.
should
Give it
we-
until it hurts. I know it's
Should
going to
we
hurt
put
me,
the-
but no.
Put the donation pages.
Yeah, please. No. So you can find them on the website. Thank you, Minoo. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Naghma. Thank you, Sejal. It's been fun. Thank you very much.